Hogwarts, rising as Harry's twin with power. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 261, returns. Harry opened his mouth. He was a little speechless because he had lost Sirius. Sirius was the closest person to him besides Darren. And then Sirius died. He couldn't muster the energy to comfort Darren. If it weren't for Darren's bad state, he would even want to lie in his dorm room like Darren, thinking about nothing, waiting for Sirius to maybe come back. I'm sorry, brother. Makes you worry. Yes, you're right, that's Sirius. Be your godfather. You must be very sad. I should actually comfort you, and the result makes you worry. Darren squeezed out a smile, and then he said hard, brother, Hermione, Ron, I. Darren was trying to say something more, to show his father's light. However, the system's prompt has sounded. Ding, this time the space-time corridor has ended. Start to prepare for the return to 10.9.8. Forehead. So fast? All right. It was himself, after all. The next step is to let him continue to brush the father's value for himself. It was just that he had stopped talking because he was about to leave, but it made Harry think that something was wrong with him. Professor. Look at Darren, something happened to Darren. No. Darren just wanted to explain, but his eyes went black, and he was already standing in the corridor of time and space. Well, the rest is up to him. Hopefully that he can handle. Darren sighed. No, system, that's the end of it? Ding, the space-time corridor can be carried out once a semester, or can be opened separately using the 10,000 Holy Father value. Which one does the host choose? Black. System, you're really too dark. Jean had always kept in mind his 10,000 Holy Fathers. Forget it, next time. Darren skimmed his lips, put on his invisibility cloak, exited the corridor of space-time and prepared to leave. However, as soon as he went out, he was stunned. Because the Gryffindor lounge was full of people. He looked around and didn't see Harry, and they were supposed to be out. I heard Darren still hasn't found it. Well, he knew that this trip out, it was impossible to come back so punctually. Fortunately, he was well prepared. Yeah, how could it have just disappeared in the dormitory? Cough. Classmates, it wasn't that I disappeared in the dormitory, it was I who ran to your lounge, wearing an invisibility cloak. I heard my sister say that Darren was probably being hidden by those vicious Slytherins. Don't mess around, kid, if I show up in your lounge in a moment, you should be suspected of stealing me. What are they hiding Darren for? That is, Slytherin has nothing to hide what he does? Don't you know that? Darren was already on the verge of finding out the potion that squibs had turned into wizards, and they were in a hurry. Forehead. It has long been studied. No, it's a system reward. However, there is some truth to this statement. Did he want to make up the words of being taken away in a moment? What does this have to do with them? They are in a hurry, worried that squibs can become wizards, then their pure blood is worthless. It turned out to be so. Alas, I don't know where Darren was taken by them, and disappeared for 2 days at once. Darren didn't pay attention after that. It turned out that he had been in the corridor of time and space for such a while, and 2 days had passed in reality. If it had been a little longer, would he have gotten back and Harry, all of them would have grown old? It's a bit of a big dream of 1,000 years of bad luck. But Darren wasn't in a hurry. He stood in the doorway of the Gryffindor lounge, wearing an invisibility cloak. Ready to wait for someone to go out, he followed out. As a result, as soon as I walked over, the Gryffindor lounge door opened. Harry came in with a calm face. There was no Hermione or Ron in the back. Harry, is there any news from Darren? The Weasley twins rushed up and asked. Mom's eyes were red with tears, and she said that if she hadn't found Darren, she would come to school to find Dumbledore. Yeah, Daddy was in a hurry, and I heard yesterday that he had a fight with Malfoy, because Malfoy taunted him why he didn't go into school and find Darren. The two of them said worriedly. Harry shook his head. The rest of the lounge also silently stopped talking together. Darren didn't bother to wait, and when no one was paying attention, he simply jumped out of the window. After he jumped, Harry looked at the window with some feeling. But immediately he shook his head in frustration. Where did Darren go? Thinking of the scene he had seen before because he had heard that Darren was missing, he had rushed into Slytherin Darren's dormitory, and Harry only felt terrible in his stomach. He had never imagined that Darren had put in so much effort to make the potion. Everyone could only see the harvest of his scenery, not at all, he himself had done so much effort in the dormitory. Harry's eyes were a little red. At that time, looking at such a scene, his only feeling was shock. Darren always thinks about others like this, because a word from someone else can work hard to make that potion. But he was so good, but when he was about to do it, those people took him away. He still doesn't know how Darren left. After Darren disappeared, there were many Aurors in the school. They explored Darren's room many times, and finally came to a conclusion. Darren disappeared suddenly. He just stood in the middle of the room and suddenly lost his breath. They thought it was most likely the door key. In order to catch Darren, someone went into Darren's dormitory when no one was there and put down the door key. Be prepared to take him straight away. The man they had also caught was some student of Slytherin. He was cast a Soul Reaper curse. Because Harry used the compound decoction to enter Slytherin, and also opened the door of Darren's dormitory, the news spread throughout Slytherin. So someone really took advantage of this situation to get into Darren's room. The student was cast a Soul Reaper spell. Leave the door key in Darren's dormitory. It's just outrageous. The door key was still there and untouched, but Darren disappeared anyway. So the Aurors thought it might be two groups of people trying to get Darren away. They thought Slytherin was also hiding someone who hadn't been caught. Now Slytherin students are still being interrogated one by one. Harry didn't want to know who had captured Darren, he just wanted to know where Darren was now. What the hell is going on with him? It's all them, and if they hadn't entered Darren's room, maybe Darren wouldn't have been caught. Episode 262, I don't remember it at all? When Darren returned to his dormitory, he felt very outrageous. I didn't expect that someone really wanted to get him away. That's too many methods, right? Then how did he not trigger that door key? Darren wondered. But right away he understood. Because that door key was next to the book he used to hold it. As long as he looks at it often, he can trigger the door key. However, these people may not really have thought of it. Darren looks good on the outside. I have written a lot. Looks like a guy who is going to work hard. He didn't read books except outside. Even if you read books, you will only read the stories that the Muggle world has taken. Eat at the loss of not understanding Darren. But even if Darren does touch the door key, he will be prompted by the system. But he might actually go and have a good time. Of course. It's all small things. The only question, how should he appear? Also, where are you going to appear? Also, how do you explain to these people where he went before? Darren felt it was a serious issue. He felt that it was a little too cumbersome to make up a passage himself. And, yes, the description never directly sees the Force. But now to make a photo ball, a little unreal. Shadow Ball is a must-kill skill, or next time. This time he used a different method. System, give me some wounds that are not too fatal, and then give me a trace of a forgotten spell. Ding, need to deduct 1000 father values. Buckle it. Fortunately, he didn't use the father value in the spacetime corridor, otherwise he wouldn't even have the father value of the forged scar now. Ding, deduction success, began to forge scars, forged successful. The sound of the system falls. Darren's body instantly appeared a little more, looking quite scarred. He found a place where no one had no portrait and lifted the cloak of invisibility. Let Lizzie take his invisibility cloak away, then pretend not to know anything, and walk safely on the lawn outside the castle. Darren. Almost as soon as Darren appeared in front of him, Snape was already beside him. Why are you here? Where did you go? You. Snape asked anxiously. But he couldn't ask any more questions right away. Not only because there are many more wounds on Darren's body, but also because of the confusion in Darren's eyes. He didn't seem to know what had happened before. You. Snape opened his mouth and said hard in Darren's gaze, don't you know anything about what's going on? Of course Darren knew what was going on. But he can't say it either. I could only look at Snape with a blank look. Professor. I'm going back to studying potions. I'll make it right away, and I'll tell you when I work it out. He said he wanted to leave. Just Snape pressed his shoulder and didn't let go at all. Darren looked at him with a puzzled expression. After a while, he finally seemed to remember something and asked, Professor, are you bothered by anything? Why don't you tell me and I'll comfort you? A gentle smile appeared on his face. Apparently, there was no sense that Snape had delayed his research on the potion. Instead, he was worried about what Snape was worried about. Full of wide eyes. If Snape hadn't been in such an environment, he would have been absolutely moved to the point of not being able to hide his emotions. But not now. Snape's eyes were filled with disbelief. The child had been missing for 2 days, and then there were wounds all over his body, and it turned out that he was not surprised at all. You don't remember it at all? Forget everything, or what terrible potion? Snape asked solemnly. Darren tilted his head. He shook his head, as if he didn't know what Snape was talking about. Then you don't feel the pain? Snape frowned. Darren showed a trance expression, and then he seemed to notice the wound on his body. Professor, this. Just as he wanted to say something, he was interrupted. Darren. It's Betsy. Betsy's eyes were a little swollen and seemed to have been crying for a long time. When she saw Darren, she immediately pounced. Darren, how are you? How did you get hurt? Did the Death Eaters do it? And you? Betsy asked a whole bunch of questions. Darren opened his eyes and seemed to finally realize something. He looked down blankly at the wounds on his body and looked at the scene around him. I seem to have been in the dorm before. How did it end here? He said hesitantly. Then he suddenly put his hand on his head, and it seemed that it was painful. Why can't I remember? Darren said bitterly. Then in Betsy's worried gaze, she suddenly closed her eyes and fell into her arms. Darren. Betsy was startled. Send him to the school doctor's office first, and I'll go find Dumbledore, and this one for Madame Pomfrey. Snape pulled out a bunch of potions. Then one turned, and the robe tumbled away. I don't know. It was there when I was pulled by the professor, and I just remember that I was going to make the potion, who knows? Darren lay in the school infirmary, obediently looking at Dumbledore and saying. Dumbledore frowned. Headmaster, I think I may have been cast the Oblivion Curse, and of course, I also noticed that I still have fainting, blazing flames, soul-snatching spells, and heart-drilling spells. Those people were supposed to be Death Eaters, and I don't know what they were taking me away for, or was it because the squibs turned into a wizard's potion? But I'm about to do it, so why should I be taken away and done? He said doubtfully, and counted the wounds on his body. A serious book is like being in class. If you were in potions class, Potter, I might give you a +2 out of your explanation, but it's not a class now, and you don't need to be there to count. Snape said with some irritation. This child has become like this, and he is still foolishly counting the wounds here. It's really Potter. Snape scolded habitually. Suddenly remembering that this stupid child was his, he didn't know whether to be angry or laugh. However, it immediately occurred to him that Dumbledore was still here. The warmth that was almost about to be revealed just now was immediately put away. Well, Severus, don't be so harsh on this child. He's still just a kid. Dumbledore said with a smile. Darren followed with a smile. It's just the heart of the mouth. Old Dang's double standard is really not a day or two. Episode 263, Kind Dumbledore. Ever since Old Dang knew that he had Grindelwald's bloodline, he had suddenly become much more amiable. The last time Lockhart made a Valentine's Day dwarf incident, he would have encouraged it. But knowing that Darren was not comfortable with the dwarfs, he threw them out. This time it was the same. Snape just said 2 sentences of irony that was not salty. In the past, Old Dang would only help Harry Potter speak, and now he can even help him talk about Snape, which is really double standard to the extreme. Of course, the Old Dang after the double standard is much more cute. Darren quickly flashed an embarrassed smile. He covered all the wounds on his body with the quilt and said guiltily, I'm sorry, Professor Snape and Headmaster Dumbledore, I really can't remember what happened before. I just remember that I was making a potion in the dormitory, and it was about to succeed, and I was planning to add to it. I'm sorry, Professor, I forgot. Anyway, I suddenly have no memory, and then I came to that grass, Darren said obediently. His face was full of embarrassment. Apparently discouraged by not being able to help Dumbledore and Snape. Oh, child, you still need a good rest, although the wounds on your body are not fatal, this time much stronger than the last time. But Madame Pomfrey said that you had to rest well, and she found that you had not slept for a long time. Don't argue that anyone who enters your room will find this fact. You must be in the room every day researching the potion, and if you do it again, I may need to have Severus take away all your experimental materials. Research is important, and so is your body, Dumbledore said solemnly. But, Professor, I need to hurry up and find out the potion. You know, there are a lot of people waiting for this potion to come out, and they're all waiting for it to give them hope. I also want them to become wizards quickly so they don't have to be ridiculed. Dumbledore suddenly felt a sour feeling in his heart. He looked at the child in front of him. It wasn't the first time he had looked at the child dumbfounded. This kid always subverted a lot of his ideas. Yes, he admitted, for a while he didn't feel good about the child's every move. There were, as he said to Severus, that anything Darren did could be benefited. There are also things he did not say. That's how incredible this kid is. This kid has a good relationship with almost everyone. Everyone mentioned him and thought he was a kind fool. Even the Slytherin students didn't say many bad things about him. For a while, he wondered if the child was pretending. Would he want to take over the whole of Hogwarts? If one day the kid makes a point and then he wants to attack Muggles, will Hogwarts be the main force in it? That's how he thought, so he wanted to know exactly what the child was thinking again and again. Until the last time, this child was forced to look like that, and as a result, he still endured not to kill anyone. He finally understood that this child had never had such ambitions. He couldn't watch so many people, because he went to die. He was much relieved. Therefore, I am deeply sorry for this child. Not to mention, he also learned from Gellert that the child had Grindelwald's bloodline. If he had heard that this child had Grindelwald's bloodline before, he would have been wary of this again. After all, this kid really looks a lot like Grindelwald. They are equally charismatic to people. But Dumbledore still did not raise the slightest alarm against him. Probably because Grindelwald's active search and weakness made him look at Darren's gaze involuntarily softened. After he no longer looked at the child with the filter of looking at the Dark Lord, Dumbledore found that he was really too much, and the child really did not have any bad intentions. Even though he took in Rogier's men, he still didn't shake the thoughts in his heart. He may have thought too much of this child. Until this time, it was even more firm in his opinion. When he entered the child's room, he saw the books, which almost seemed to have been turned over thousands of times, and the crucibles that seemed to have been experimented many times. There are even recipes written on the walls, water cups dropped on the ground, clean marks on the bed. All this proves that this child has made the best efforts for others. It can be installed outside, but how to install it in his dormitory? Not to mention that he was suddenly arrested, how can this be disguised? And these traces in the dormitory are almost not caused by magic, all because of the use of too many times to use. There is no way to disguise this. Merlin couldn't do it either. So, this kid is really a kind kid. I'm sorry. I didn't find you sooner, and you suffered so much, and if I could, I really wanted these injuries on my body. Dumbledore took off his glasses and wiped his eyes. His tone was somewhat choked. This old man really felt so sorry for Darren. No, Headmaster Dumbledore. It's not your fault, I accidentally got caught by them. It is also that I am in a bit of a hurry, and I will keep doing experiments in the dormitory. It has nothing to do with you. I'm sorry, I'll listen to you, I won't be so anxious in the future. Darren showed a panicked expression. Apparently, he saw Dumbledore's appearance and thought he had upset Dumbledore. How could this child be so kind? Whether it was Dumbledore or Snape, the idea came to mind at the same time. Well, child, you have to forgive an old man for his sentimentality, after all he is old. But he still has to warn you that if you don't pay attention to your body again, he may need to do some small punishment, he said solemnly. Then, when he walked out of the school doctor's office, as if remembering something again, he said, by the way, there may be Aurors coming in a while, don't be afraid, they don't dare to cause trouble at school. Also, after some people visit, I hope to hurry back to my lounge. I had a hard time sending Bobby away, and if she saw someone disturbing Darren's rest, she might get angry. Chapter 264, The Ministry of Magic's Difficulties. When Dumbledore had finished speaking, Darren saw Snape glaring at the corner. But Snape didn't say anything and hurried away after Dumbledore. Phew, he must have found us. After Harry put down his cloak of invisibility, he said with some helplessness. They had sneaked in behind Dumbledore and Snape's ass to see how Darren was. Originally thought to be quiet, who knew that it had been discovered by Dumbledore and Snape? Well, leave those things alone, even Headmaster Dumbledore allowed us to come in. He certainly can't take us, even if he can't stare at us, he can't deduct a point for us. Ron said triumphantly. Darren felt he should have forgotten one word, revenge after the fact. However, as a little holy father, he still said with some disapproval, don't say this about Professor Snape, the professor is very soft-hearted, he is just worried that if you run out, you will meet Death Eaters. You'll be hurt just like me. Moreover, he didn't point out you just now, he was very considerate. Oh, all right. No one was touched by his words. Is everyone so upset with Snape's senses? Darren sighed. A moment of silence for Snape's popularity. Well, don't say those words, Darren, how do you feel? Hermione asked cautiously. The expression on her face was full of guilt. Because she also felt that it was because she had not succeeded in disguising Darren last time. She shed tears in Slytherin, causing Slytherin to be suspicious. This would let everyone in Slytherin know that Darren's room door would only require his approval to enter. I'm sorry, Darren, it's all because of me. Hermione said a little sadly. Then she was greeted by Darren's arms. Oh, Hermione, you always say I'm kind, but you're the kindest. I know you did this only because you wanted to know who had opened the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets. You want to find an heir, you want to clear my suspicions. Darren accepted the father's value and spoke gently. He sat up hard and gently touched Hermione's hair. He continued softly, actually, this matter is more of a bad thing for me, and if I can be more useful, I can help you inquire about intelligence. Obviously I'm also in Slytherin, and I still need you to make such a big effort, and I sometimes wonder if I'm really a little useless. No, Darren, how could you be useless? That is, you have done a lot of things, you forgot, not counting this squib turned into a wizard's potion, you also developed a modified version of the antidote. Yeah, whoever dares to say you're useless, I'll clean him up. Harry and the three of them looked at Darren firmly. The three of them didn't think Darren was useless at all. He's just too kind. It's really nice campus life, just. We may have to take up Mr. Potter's time for a while, can you please leave first? Just as Harry and the three of them were moved, a cold voice interrupted their thoughts. They turned their heads and looked over. Director of the Enforcement Department of Magical Law, Amelia Susan Bones. Someone reported Potter for performing pranks, pretending to disappear, abusing the resources of the Ministry of Magic. Can I ask you a few questions? The woman's voice was too cold. It made Harry and Hermione furious. How could it be? How could Darren possibly make his prank disappear? Hermione said in disbelief, looking at her expression, as if the people in the Ministry of Magic were all having a problem with their brains. Well, Mr. Minister thinks Mr. Potter is strong enough to do that, so let me come over and ask a few questions. Don't worry, I'm personally inclined that you're not lying. After all, no one wants to hurt themselves so much, just for the sake of pranks, Amelia said quietly. Hermione and Harry opened their mouths and wanted to say something. But they found that at this point, they could not say anything. Because the woman in front of her seems to believe them, but she does not smile at them. But if you want to accuse her, there is no reason, because she said, she personally thinks that Darren is not suspect. He is the director of the Law Enforcement Department of the Ministry of Magic. Darren was not surprised. As soon as he heard of Mr. Minister, he knew that Fudge should have been reinstated. Cassandra had reminded him of this before. He didn't take it too seriously. He will not let himself suffer, and if this minister has the ability to wrongfully accuse him again, he can send this minister to trial again. Okay, you can ask, I'll tell you as long as I know. Darren said obediently. He sat politely. Amelia noticed that he frowned a little because it hurt too much to sit up, but she listened carefully to her questioning at once. There is no thought of being angry because of being suspected. It was a very polite child. This was Amelia's first thought. And this idea, after she began to ask the first question, deepened the impression. Hello, the first question is, do you remember how you disappeared from the room? Darren made a serious thinking expression. Then he shook his head and said, I'm sorry ma'am, I can't remember, I don't have a single impression. I'm so sorry, the boy had a thick apology on his face. It seems to be extremely guilty. Obviously, the Ministry of Magic was trying to make things difficult for him, but he still didn't complain a bit. He even apologized to her for not being able to think of it. Amelia was a little embarrassed. However, she was also instructed to do things, and could only say with a cold face, then the second question, may I ask you if the wound on your body was inflicted on yourself by yourself? As soon as Amelia asked this question, she felt that Fudge had a brain problem. Crazy, right? How could anyone possibly create a wound on themselves? This child was forced to forget everything, he couldn't remember anything, and he could insult the four people like this? Episode 265, You Are the Fierce Man. Amelia was bored. Then she also saw the expressions of Harry Potter and his two friends next to him, the kind of angry and stupid expressions. When she wants to come? Or is it not because Fudge is a minister? But it was indeed her fault, so she could only pretend not to see it, and looked seriously at Darren. Darren seemed stunned. He opened his mouth, as if he were a little tongue-in-cheek. Yes, this kind of question is simply a naked insult to him. Amelia was embarrassed. She even wanted to turn around and go. But Darren finally spoke. No, I swear, I didn't put a curse on myself, you see here. This is the trace of the Soul Reaper curse, this is the trace of the Drill Heart curse, this is the trace of the Dark Magic, and here. These are curses that require great malice, and I have no way to release them. He unwrapped the quilt and gave Amelia a serious look. At first, Amelia could still wonder with an eyebrow that it was who had been so cruel as to have this child hurt so badly. After that, the more I listened, the more uncomfortable it became. Their Ministry of Magic failed to protect the child, causing the child to be seriously injured and even forgotten. Up to now, instead of hurrying to find the murderer, he interrogated the child here. Yes, I'm sorry. Did I scare you? Darren accepted the Holy Father's value, and the expression on his face was concerned, making it almost impossible for Amelia to lift her head. Finally, she stood up angrily. I'm sorry, you're... Darren looked at Amelia. How did you get up? Isn't their conversation still quite enjoyable? How nice it is for the father to brush him. The inquiry has been completed, and you can rest assured that we will surely find those who hurt you as soon as possible. Amelia was a little ashamed, but she tried to speak as coldly as possible. It seems that she should find out what happened to Darren Porter before. You must know that when she heard Fudge's request, no one in the ministry wanted to come, only because she had just returned to the Ministry of Magic, she was asked by the minister to do such a thing. It seems that what happened before is certainly not small. She also needs to understand. And looking into the child's eyes, she couldn't do anything to keep asking. Rest well. Amelia said coldly. Then she got up and quickly left the place. Minister Fudge was simply insane, this director is such a good man. Darren sighed after Amelia left. Almost every word he said would give him the value of the Holy Father. Except for the first time, everything else is full value, good guy. Have you forgotten what she came to do? Harry looked at Darren helplessly. How do you think everyone is a good person? She's here to interrogate me. Darren replied obediently. Then Harry's expression became even more speechless. Then you still think she's a good person? I was a good man. This director didn't mean it, I just found out that she was a little sad, she must not see me hurt, I think she must be a good person, Darren said cheerfully. Then Mrs. Pomfrey's voice came from outside the door. Yeah, now you see everyone as a good person, and you don't care about your body at all. I can explain your wounds to others like a class, I see that you are still too little in the school doctor's room, drink it. Madame Pomfrey's expression was serious. As soon as she waved her wand, a large pile of potions appeared in front of Darren. Darren looked at so many potions a little dazedly. Suddenly remembering what Madame Pomfrey had said last time, he went into the school infirmary and let him sleep until his injuries were all right. No way? How many tasks will he miss? It seems you remember, then. Don't let me say it a second time. Madame Pomfrey's expression became even more sinister. Darren sighed. He picked up the potion and secretly asked the system. System, these potions won't really make me sleep until the sky is old, right? Ding, no, judging by the efficacy, this batch of potions comes from Snape and the medicinal materials inside are excellent, and it only takes 2 days to heal the injuries on the host. This. Couldn't Snape have done it for him? Darren sighed in his heart. The surface is, of course, a helpless expression. I'm sorry, Madame Pomfrey, I was the one who worried you. It's just that I still want to continue to study potions, and I feel that I don't really have much of a problem. Okay, well, I'm too reckless, I'll just drink it, Darren sighed, and then he opened the potion and drank it bottle by bottle. But before he could finish drinking, he felt so sleepy that he couldn't open his eyes. In the confusion, Hermione was heard asking in a joking voice, Madam, you might as well consider letting Darren sleep at the end of the day, he is always being targeted by the bad guys, maybe he can be safer with you. Forehead. To say that the fierce or Hermione you vary. You're the one who's going to be to the point. Harry came out of the school infirmary with Hermione and Ron with a worried look on his face. Darren always had accidents, which really made them feel terrible. Yo, Potter, I heard that your hapless brother has finally found and is admitted to the school doctor's office? Just as Harry and they walked out of the school doctor's office, Malfoy's voice rang out. What's the matter with you? Harry said impatiently. Then he followed Hermione and Ron to the Gryffindor lounge without looking back. He was in a bad mood now and didn't want to argue with Malfoy at all. But Malfoy grabbed his robe. Stop, I'm going to ask. Malfoy's words stopped because Harry's robe had been torn by him. And a diary fell out of his pocket. Malfoy immediately picked it up excitedly, and he shouted, Look what I found, this is Potter's diary, isn't this the Weasley's little Potter fan? Why are you here? Could it be tracking Harry Potter? So, I'll read you Scarhead's diary and you'll shout out Ron poor ghost, how's it going, Malfoy? Episode 266, I am Tom Riddle. Harry was furious. Not just because Malfoy took his diary, but also because Malfoy was so hard to hear. And he made Ginny cry. Although Harry felt that the Weasley's little daughter was really difficult to say. Every time I saw him and Darren, I became surprised. But, right? Mrs. Weasley and Mr. Weasley were very good to him and to Darren, and he certainly could not have let their little daughter be hurt. Also, he had just seen that Ginny's eyes were red and she was still shedding tears. She covered her mouth in horror, obviously frightened by Malfoy. Malfoy, are you enough? Harry pulled out his wand. He couldn't care less about not letting the magic unleash in the corridor, he just wanted Malfoy to pay for it now. Darren's re-injury made him a little irritable. Malfoy simply ignored his rage. He happily opened the diary, trying in vain to find what Harry had written, but he rummaged through it and found nothing. Potter, that's it, what's the use of you wanting? Let me see, we should surprise Potter, just. Malfoy pointed to the distance, which was a window. Malfoy was ready to throw the diary out. Put it down, I warn you. Harry roared angrily. Malfoy glanced at him and then. Remove your weapons. The diary in Malfoy's hand flew up, and Ron caught it. I'm going to tell Filch that Scarhead you cast a spell in the hallway. Malfoy was furious, and he looked at Harry in exasperation. But a voice interrupted him. It was Mr. Filch. His sinister face appeared next to Malfoy's, startling Malfoy. You, what do you do? Aren't you trying to tell me something? Filch's face looked particularly gloomy. Damn Death Eaters, they always hide and can't find them, and if I catch them, I'll give them all to Dumbledore and let them drop out of school. Filch looked at Malfoy grimly. He suddenly asked, I heard that your father used to be a Death Eater, right? No, my dad isn't. Oh, don't be complacent, I must let my father fire you. Malfoy was terrified by Filch, and of course, even so, he did not forget to speak viciously to Harry and Filch. Thank you. Harry wanted to thank Filch. Although Filch helped him, it should only be for Darren's sake. But he was also interrupted by Filch. "No, you just saw Darren, how is he?" Filch asked worriedly. There was some nervousness on his face. Harry thought he was just worried about Darren's injuries, when he heard Mr. Filch say in a weeping voice, "You advise him, you don't need to study such a stupid potion for people like us, we are not in a hurry. Everyone has waited for so many years, and now they just want him to be safe." Harry thought of Darren's sleepy look just now, and his heart wrenched. Mrs. Pomfrey said Darren seemed to have not rested for a long time. She lost her temper more, because he was spoiling his body. Although the potion is strong, it also takes time to recover. Time passes so fast in him, it's like he's forcibly speeding up his own time, maybe just for those potions. Madame Pomfrey said helplessly. The expression on her face was helpless and sighing. She couldn't have been more harsh on Darren for his kindness. It can only force him to rest more. She really couldn't do anything about it. Harry's expression was even more sad. He nodded and walked uncomfortably to the Gryffindor lounge. It wasn't until he returned to his dorm room that he finally sighed softly. Why do those Death Eaters always stare at Darren for harm? Why did they bully Darren like this? I have the ability to come to him. He was the savior, and Darren was not the savior, so why put everything on Darren's shoulders? He clenched his fists in anger and slammed his fist on the bed. After he smashed it, he was pulled back to reality by a touch. This is? That's right, that diary. This black diary had always found Harry useful. Moreover, the name Tom Riddle always made Harry feel that it was a name remembered from the depths of his memory. He felt as if he and this man had known each other for a long time. But even so, he still couldn't figure out what was in the diary. Maybe he could try to keep a diary on it? As soon as he thought about it, Harry took out his quill and prepared to write about what had happened today. But something strange happened. As soon as his ink dripped up, it was absorbed by this diary. Then, a line of font appeared in front of Harry. "Hello, I'm Tom Riddle, are you trying to find me?" Oh my god, this diary is certainly not a simple diary. As in the original book, Harry was taken by Tom Riddle to see what had happened 50 years earlier. He rushed out of the dormitory in horror. He found Hermione and Ron. "Come here, I'm going to tell you something. 50 years ago, it was Hagrid who opened the Chamber of Secrets." Harry mysteriously told Riddle everything he had shown him. "Hagrid? Impossible, you think Hagrid is the heir to Slytherin?" Hermione and Ron could hardly believe it, but the facts lay there. And Hagrid was indeed fired. And Hagrid likes to keep large animals as pets, and he really doesn't have to wash them. When they were in first grade, Hagrid also raised a dragon, although in the end the dragon was taken away by Ron's brother Charlie. But it also means that Hagrid did raise this animal. Therefore, some of the animals raised by Hagrid may really have the ability to petrify people. "Harry, do you remember that school hadn't started yet, and you accidentally ran into Diagon Alley?" Almost frightened Darren that time, Hermione suddenly seemed to remember something, and asked in shock. "Yeah, Hagrid is also in Diagon Alley, and he says he wants to buy some potion to get rid of carnivorous slugs." The three of them were silent at the same time. Wouldn't it really be Hagrid? Remembering what had happened recently, they were a little afraid to let Darren know that Hagrid was the one who did the petrification incident. Darren must have looked at them in amazement, and then he would run to Hagrid to find out. Then he will probably get a heart-wrenching answer that Hagrid is really the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets. Of course, it is also possible that Hagrid's pet accidentally opened it. But that would definitely make Darren sad. Episode 267, The Scumbag Smile. In the end, they agreed that they still wouldn't tell Darren. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Or, never mind. After all, since the previous petrification of Justin, there have been no more attacks on people. And now it seems that those Death Eaters are much more annoying than Hagrid's pets. As long as it doesn't appear again, it's as if you don't know. After all, those people will wake up right away. Professor Sprout had said that the mandrake was about to ripen, Hermione concluded. Darren woke up in the school doctor's office on the third day. As he sat up, he sighed again at the magic of magic. "Every time I wake up, it's like being born again. I'm in great shape." After he learned from the population of Madame Pomfrey that he had slept only 2 days. With a look of excitement, he thanked Mrs. Pomfrey several times. Okay, go back." Madame Pomfrey finally showed her first smile in this period of time. "Thank you, madam, you have been good to me, I know in my heart. I always fail your trust and always get into trouble. You child. As long as you're well, don't come over with injuries anymore. I'm an elderly woman who can't stand that much fright," Madame Pomfrey said helplessly. Then she saw that Darren looked even more guilty. This made her unable to utter a word again. So she hugged Darren. "Well, as long as you live, I'll cure you, you know, my medical skills are good." Well, don't say goodbye to me again, Harry, they just came over and asked if you're awake, and you haven't gone far yet, Madame Pomfrey said softly. Darren nodded hurriedly, and he jumped out of bed with an excited expression on his face. Then he ran out happily. Day by day, day by day. Except for releasing his Squib Cannon Wizard Complex version, Darren didn't dare to do anything during this time. If he went on any longer, he was afraid of making Snape mentally weak. There were no more petrification attacks inside the castle. Darren and Harry didn't hear the basilisk again. It seemed that everything was quiet. On Easter holidays, new problems arose among their second-year students. They need to choose a new course. Darren looked at the course on the table. Arithmetic, divination, ancient magic texts, protection of magical creatures, alchemy. He remembered that if he had chosen them all, he would be able to harvest a time turner. So he honestly ticked the back of every course. Oh my god, you two are crazy, aren't you? Yeah, I see some classes are repetitive, how can you possibly take 2 courses at the same time? Harry and Ron revealed their scumbag. Darren just wanted to laugh. He remembered that he seemed to be like that before. But then he crossed. He has now become a school bully. Of course. The little father cannot say that. So he said obediently, I want to learn a little more and then use it to help my brother later. Darren, how come you're always so kind? Hermione said with a sigh. Every time she saw Darren, she was worried that he had been bullied. He was like a light in this school, a little angel. Every time I saw him, I thought life was too good. I'm not actually very kind, and I sometimes get jealous. Darren looked at their surprised expressions, smiled softly, and said, I'm jealous that my brother can live with mom and dad for an extra year. Jealous that you can be together all the time, jealous of how you have such a good meal? Also jealous. Oh, Darren, this isn't called jealousy. You're just a little sad. You really have to take a good look at Malfoy's first-grade expression. That's called jealousy, you're at best a bad admirer. But if only Darren, you really got Gryffindor, and we could have been together all the time, Harry said helplessly. His brother couldn't even get jealous. He also said he was not kind. Why can't even Slytherins help Darren become a little more discerning? Where did he have to take Darren to make him less kind? It can't be Azkaban, right? Forget it, Darren might be afraid. No, maybe Darren might talk to them and persuade them to be kind? Harry could imagine such a scene. Fortunately, he wasn't going to take Darren to Azkaban. He sat there thinking wildly. And Darren is also thinking, it seems that in the original book, it is also the time that Tom Riddle got Ginny to the Chamber of Secrets. Then again, how could he show his father's light this time? And there is also a question, the basilisk seems to be already his, can Tom Riddle's play continue? The most important point, if Harry finally wants to kill the basilisk, will he stop it? It was impossible to kill the basilisk he had just gotten his hands on, right? It was the basilisk he had just gotten his hands on, and he hadn't had time to take a good look yet. These times, they were separated in a hurry. All he remembered was the basilisk's big brass eyes. Forget it, if the long cool, the basilisk can live, the long is not cool or forget it, he can't afford to raise that big guy. No pets at home. This morning. The sun is shining and the air is fresh. It was a good weather to hit Quidditch. But Tom Riddle's diary was stolen. It's a horrible thing. After all, Tom Riddle's existence, for now, seemed to be known only to Harry, but now that diary had been lost so easily. Those people didn't steal anything else important, just stared at a diary. Apparently, the person who stole the thing was well aware of Tom Riddle's presence. Only Gryffindor people can steal, because only they know the password. Well, Darren knows that too, but you think he'll do this kind of thing? Harry said helplessly. Hermione and Ron shook their heads at once. They just subconsciously wanted to say that Darren knew. But it wasn't thought that Darren could have done such a thing. The 3 of them were very uncomfortable. It's time for a Quidditch match. It's really good weather, we can definitely win. Wood said enthusiastically. He added a lot of dishes to each team member, expecting them to play a good result. Hi Darren, what else are you going to eat? Would you like to add another small cake? Wood leaned over to Slytherin's table again and spoke excitedly to him. And with a mocking glance, Marvra, the current captain of the Slytherin Quidditch team. Apparently, he had come to mock them. Because Flint, the captain of the previous Quidditch team, and several of his team members, had died in the last attack. So during this time, although the Slytherin Quidditch team changed captains and changed players, it was impossible to win Gryffindor. In fact, if Flint had been killed, Wood certainly wouldn't have come over and taunted him at this point. After all, there are many houses between them, and Wood will respect a dead man. But it's a shame that Flint and a few of his players aren't good people at all. Even if they don't die, they will be caught in Azkaban. Let them die crisply and neatly, it's really cheap for them. Episode 268, The Basilisk appears again. Wood, don't be complacent, even if we change players, we will definitely win. Marver gritted his teeth and refused to admit defeat. Losers can't lose. Even if he knows that there is no hope of winning, he must send out the anger that they must win. But my heart was too angry. He set his sights on Darren's body. I originally wanted to scold him twice, but looking at Darren's embarrassed look, he skimmed his lips. Forget it, don't bother with this Gryffindor lion. This guy is a stupid lion who blends into Slytherin, what is he talking about? If you really want to worry about him, maybe you can think about the fate of Flint. Walk and see. Mavra said in exasperation, and then he left with his men. Wood looked at Darren triumphantly and whispered in his ear, see? If you are assigned to Gryffindor, we will not let you be bullied, and they have a lot to do with Slytherin. Darren immediately showed a look of gratitude and embarrassment on his face, and he quickly said, no, Slytherin's classmates didn't bully me, everyone is very friendly. Friendly? Wood looked at the group of Slytherins who showed a threatening expression on his face and deeply realized how unreliable Darren's evaluation of people was. Alas! Wood's long sigh was incomprehensible for the fact that Darren had been stupid at such a young age. Thankfully, the Quidditch game is about to start, and these things can be said later. Darren was dragged by Harry and prepared to rush to Quidditch Stadium. While on the way, Darren heard the familiar voice and said in a terrifying voice, kill him. Tearing me apart, I'm going to kill. I must kill someone. Tear him up, and this guy really ran out, hopefully this time not really being killed by Harry. Darren sighed, a look of horror on his face, and even a vague guess. Brother, I heard it again. Darren said with a panicked look. The same was true of Harry on the other side. It's that voice again, I think. Darren was trying to say what Hermione had in mind in the original book, and then saw Hermione run away without looking back. Forehead. This girl is also too anxious. This is simply a dish for the basilisk, but fortunately, it is only petrified, and it can be cured immediately. Hermione. Although he complained in his heart, Darren still showed a puzzled expression on his face, and he wanted to stop Hermione. It's just that Hermione has already run away. But her voice still came from afar, I'll go to the library to check the materials, you go first. Library? Is she going at this time? Ron shouted in disbelief. Yeah, how could she go this time? Harry showed a look of approval and agreement. He was still wondering what the hell was going on with that voice. But Darren had hesitated to say his guess. Brother, Ron, I think Hermione wants to go with me. If you think about it, we're both snakeheads, and we can hear sounds that no one else can hear. You say, could that voice be the sound of a snake? He said in a deep voice. Ron and Harry's eyes widened. They can hardly control their bodies and expressions. Hagrid. They shouted the name in unison, as if they immediately remembered something. Hagrid? What does this have to do with Hagrid? You don't think Hagrid always likes to have pets, you think he's the one who made the snake, do you? It couldn't have been Hagrid's, Hagrid was very measured, and he should not have been the one who kept the snake. Darren's words earned a sum of fatherly value. It's just that what he said, in addition to touching Harry, is more about making them feel outrageous. Is Hagrid measured? He has a fart measure. A man who can secretly raise dragons, they think that using outrageous descriptions of Hagrid is a prize. But they still didn't speak. Because Darren's next words attracted their attention. Brother, Ron, don't think I'm wrong. My instincts are still very strong at times, and last year I always thought that Professor Snape was a good person, and in the end he was really a good person. Harry, they smiled a little bitterly. But it still acquiesced to Darren's words. This is a fact. Unfortunately, Darren did not feel Flint after their malice, and was almost killed by them. No, brother, I feel their malice, but I want to know what they want to do to you, that's why. He said with some embarrassment. Then he saw Harry's disapproving look in his eyes, and quickly and obediently skipped the topic. Well, brother, let's go on to say this snake has 2 brass eyes. Every time I saw its eyes, I felt like I was going to die, and if Hagrid had raised him, he would probably have died, he said very seriously. Specifically, it also describes the feeling of seeing those eyes. So Hagrid was wronged? Harry said in surprise. Then he was a little embarrassed and told Darren about Riddle's diary that he had previously concealed. I'm sorry Darren, we hid it from you again. Harry said guiltily. Although they were for Darren's good, they really didn't tell him. Oh, brother, no need to apologize, I know your worries. Before I knew about it, I might rush to Hagrid to inquire about it as you might think. When Hagrid knows that I doubt him, he will be very sad. Darren said with some sadness. Not knowing the helplessness of Harry's heart. Obviously they were worried that Darren would be sad about their concealment. Instead, Darren thought that if he questioned Hagrid, it would make Hagrid sad. He was always so kind. Hagrid would be very happy to know that you said that. But now there is a question, and that is, do we want to go to Hermione? Episode 269. He still wants to kill someone. Ron helplessly walked around the side. He looked at the time, then said anxiously, "Oh, Harry, hurry up to the Quidditch stadium, and the Quidditch will start soon." Harry hesitated. He was not too comfortable going alone. But Darren laughed and said gently, "Brother, you and Ron go to the court." "Oh, Ron, you love Quidditch games the most, and definitely want to watch it." I went to find Hermione and told her the news. I should have said it earlier, she must have thought of this matter too, so she rushed to the library to confirm the news. "Oh, Ron, don't be embarrassed, anyway, I don't like Quidditch, Darren is telling the truth. He felt that Quidditch was not as good as ordinary football. Although he crossed the football of his former country a bit hard to describe. Specifically men's football. The women's soccer girls are still very good. Even so, it doesn't stop him from enjoying watching football games. Quidditch is a bit crotch-pulling. With this time, he might as well go out and find Hermione to see if he could refresh a mission. But his face still showed a proper look of pity. "Or, Darren, I'll go," Ron said sheepishly, but he was immediately nudged by Darren. "Go, can I and Hermione still lose? We will be back soon." He turned and ran, leaving Harry and Ron standing where they were. "Harry, I kind of understand your concern about Darren every time. If I had a brother like Darren, I would have been worried all day that he was being bullied. Even Ginny's, I'd be worried, not to mention Darren," he said helplessly. Harry shrugged his shoulders. There is no way. He wished Darren could be less kind so that he would be much more at ease. "Okay, let's hurry up, take the first, and make Darren happy. He likes me to take the first place the most," Harry said happily. He and Ron strode toward Quidditch Stadium. As they left, Darren was walking slowly toward the library. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now within a minute of releasing the temporary task, run upstairs to follow the sound of the basilisk. After seeing Hermione, he showed a shocked look and quickly pounced on her, blocking the basilisk's view with the water curtain. And after Hermione is petrified, he makes the appearance that he wants to kill the basilisk, but he can't get a spell in the end. Ding, after the task is completed, get the reward forged card ×1. Does the host receive the task? Access. The task of forging a card is, of course, to be picked up. As the number of people he met increased, the more and more scenes he needed to forge now, and he always needed the Holy Father to forge it, and he was also very difficult. Although he has recently left everyone with the image of the Holy Father, it is much easier for him to brush the Father value. But there are more and more textbooks to learn, and more places that require the value of the Father. He still has to save a little. Tearing him. Kill him. He asked me to kill. I'm going to kill him. After Darren picked it up, sure enough, the sound of the basilisk came from his ears. He immediately ran with the sound of the basilisk. He had an anxious expression on his face, which made people feel worried when they looked at it. "Quick, I must hurry up again, I will catch up, I will definitely save them," Darren whispered, and then heard that there was no father value around him, so he shut up and quickly followed the basilisk. "Hermione! Be careful," after turning a corner, Darren exclaimed. His face was filled with shock. Hermione, who was facing him, was also shocked, and she was about to say something when she saw Darren pounce on her quickly. "Be careful? What to be careful with?" Hermione was in a trance for a moment. Then she opened her eyes and saw the curtain of water that Darren had unleashed with his wand. Through the water curtain, she saw those brass-colored eyes. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the basilisk rushing towards Darren. She panicked and tried to make Darren careful. But the next second, her consciousness had gone dark. "Hermione." Darren looked at the petrified Hermione in disbelief, looking slowly at the petrified Hermione. "Are you my master?" The basilisk's voice rang in Darren's ears. Darren ignored it and just stared at Hermione in a daze. "You killed her." He seemed incredulous, and seemed to be full of murderous intent. "I didn't. She was just petrified." The host someone came. "Master, when are you taking me away? I didn't want to follow him anymore. Master, I went first." "Tear. Kill him." The voice of the basilisk left Darren's side. Before leaving, he hooked Darren's arm with his tail. Hiss. "This guy is so handsome. The kind of plague of the wild python. Very cool." But thinking about what the guy said, Darren raised his wand. "Someone is coming, you can put it on. I'm going to kill you." He raised his wand, as if with great perseverance aimed at the basilisk's back. "The flames are raging, Avadisal, drill the heart and cut the bone." He shouted several words in anger, but none of the spells worked, and he could only watch the basilisk disappear before his eyes. Ding, congratulations to the host for getting the forged card. Potter, you killed. Hufflepuff's Ernie looked at Darren in panic. Then he thought Darren had killed someone, and he blurted it out. He himself did not expect to be so stupid. He covered his mouth. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'll just go, I definitely won't tell anyone. Ernie turned to leave, but it was too late, and his shouts alarmed too many people. Darren. Who is this time? Hermione. Professor McGonagall's eyes widened in disbelief. She seemed to have some unreaction, and this time it was Hermione. Professor, it's him, it's Darren Porter. I heard him read those incantations, and I felt terrible when I listened. He killed Hermione, and he wanted to kill me, Ernie said excitedly. The last time Justin said bad things about Potter, he was almost killed by Potter. This time too. I don't know how Hermione offended him, but I heard him calling for Avada's death. He just wanted to kill Hermione, but probably because he saw me coming, he would petrify Hermione so she couldn't speak, Ernie said in fear. He was afraid that if he didn't say it now, he wouldn't have a chance to say it. Who let Justin be petrified so coincidentally? He just thought it was Darren who did 9. Episode 270, Darren, your legs. Darren, how are you? Professor McGonagall ignored Ernie's words. She leaned down to look at Darren and asked worriedly. The child was so kind, could he accept Hermione being petrified in front of him? Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the father system playing around the host, now release a temporary mission, petrify some of the legs with the father's value, and ask Professor McGonagall, why can't I use the killing charm? Ding, after the mission is completed, get the skill, petrified, does the host take the task? Access, this time, there was a petrification. Darren clicked on it without thinking. And using 100 father values, he petrified half of his own legs. Fortunately, he was sitting on the ground at this time, so he would not be discovered now. It still has to be revealed little by little to be shocked. Darren blinked. Then his face turned desperate. He looked up at Professor McGonagall. Professor, why can't I use lethal magic? I know the Avadaso curse, why can't I use it? Obviously I really want to kill it, why can't I do it? Darren looked at Professor McGonagall with a trance-like expression. His face was full of pain. Obviously he had already seen the guy, why couldn't he even hurt the guy? Why is this so? Obviously, learning magic should be able to protect his friends, why did he watch all his friends get hurt one by one? Professor, I've watched Hermione get petrified, I can't do anything, I'm so useless. I thought I could catch the Death Eaters, but why couldn't I kill a snake? Aside from Ernie, most people simply don't believe that Darren petrified Hermione. How could Darren possibly do such a thing? They were just wondering, why did Darren just read such a vicious spell? Only when they heard these words from him, they smiled bitterly and did not have a trace of doubt. Silly child, you are too kind, of course you can't do it now. You have no determination to kill, you are shaken. Professor McGonagall said sadly. Good children like Darren will be very difficult to use the killing curse. You even just chanted the mantra, you can't even use it. Professor McGonagall picked up Darren's spell and used the flashback spell. Sure enough, there was not even a shadow of the killing curse in his wand. Professor, I'm too weak to do anything. I can only watch Hermione petrified in front of me, I can't even help her, His voice gradually swallowed, and finally he couldn't even say the rest of the words. Darren. Let's take Hermione to the school doctor's office first. Also, Madame Pomfrey can save her, Professor McGonagall said worriedly. Darren was always like this, and it was the duty of their professors to appear in the school, not the responsibility of the child. Yes. I know the professor, I can get back in the mood right away. I'm not a kid anymore, Darren showed a strong expression. Then he tried to stand up, but as soon as he stood up, he fell down and sat down. It's okay, I'm just a little weak legs. Only Professor McGonagall was already screaming in amazement. Darren, your legs. Professor McGonagall squatted down without an image. She looked at Darren's petrified legs in a panic. Don't you feel it? Your legs are petrified, petrified? Darren seemed to feel it like this, and he gently pulled open his robe to see that sure enough, his legs were petrified. Ding, congratulations to the host for gaining the skill, petrified. Petrification. The degree of petrification can be determined by the host's mana. The degree of petrification can also be used to petrify the opponent, and the degree of petrification is determined by the amount of the Holy Father value used. This skill is quite interesting. Accept and accept it. Darren rushed to collect the reward. Only then did he look at Professor McGonagall. An apologetic expression appeared on his face. Seems to feel like he's causing trouble for Professor McGonagall. Professor, I'm sorry, I didn't pay attention. Silly boy, don't talk, let Madame Pomfrey show you, how could this be? She looked a little panicked. She remembered that Darren had faced that monster several times, and obviously nothing had happened before. Darren was taken by her to the school doctor's office. Madame Pomfrey and Snape, as well as Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall, all looked at him. Darren, you faced that snake before. It should be a snake. I think your reasoning is good. So, how did you feel when you faced that snake before? Is there any difference between that and facing the snake this time? Dumbledore asked solemnly. He tapped his wand lightly on Darren's body leg, but came to no conclusion. Although Darren still had unconcealed grief in his eyes, he still obediently recalled, the first time I faced that snake, I felt very tired, but I could still support it. The second time I faced the snake, I could no longer face its eyes the whole time, and after I looked into its eyes, I could not stand. That's why I suspected at the time that it might be getting stronger. And then there's today, Darren accepted the father's value, and his voice became even more choked. He was silent for a moment and a half. Dumbledore did not urge him, but instead conjured him a glass of lemonade. Drink some lemon juice and it will be fine. Darren nodded. His eyes were red, but he forced out a smile. Sigh. Now I don't even have to talk. By a modicum, you can get father value. But thank you to the professors and to President Dumbledore for your willingness to wait for me. Darren couldn't explain. He pursed his lips and said with a forced smile, this time I faced the snake, and I was a little afraid to face its eyes. Yes, at the time my intuition prompted me not to face its eyes. I released the water curtain. I tried to block Hermione, I subconsciously closed my eyes, but the snake pounced. It pounced on me and I opened my eyes. After that, I wanted to kill it, but I couldn't. It never occurred to me that I didn't stand in front of Hermione. If only I had done that, Hermione might not have had to be petrified. It was all my fault. Why was I then? Episode 271, Quidditch Tournament cancelled. Darren said with red eyes. As he spoke, his voice lowered, and he seemed to be back in a trance that time again. Severus! Dumbledore cried out worriedly. But he was too late, because Snape had already poured the potion in his hand into Darren's mouth. Cough cough cough. Darren looked up at Snape helplessly. Professor, I'm okay, He just couldn't think for a moment and a half about what to make up next. Then he was poured a bottle of potions by Snape. He suspected that it was still sleeping pills. It's your antidote, you can't taste it, can you? Well. System, really fake? He hadn't tasted the new antidote. It's all medicine, what does he drink those things for? And when he boiled it, it tasted weird. He suspected that the taste was particularly bad, so he did not dare to drink it at all. Ding is an improved version of the antidote, which adds a few herbs, there are. And also, they improve the taste a lot. However, these few herbs added to the movement will cause the value of this potion to increase tenfold. This. Snape was awesome and improved the potion. It was a good drink to change the potion. Was it specially changed for him? The old bat is really good at being a good father. However, the old licking dog did not seem to have let him drink the normal potion since the first day he saw him. Precious herbs are added to make the potion taste mellow. And the efficacy becomes excellent. It is really for the son of the goddess who can do anything. But of course he couldn't say that. He was afraid that the old licking dog would be angry and give him a forgetfulness. So he squeezed out a smiling expression and said, the professor's potion is better improved, joined several medicinal herbs. I thought about this direction at the time. But there are too many poor people, like the Longbottoms, they have no money, I just want them to be able to see the disease, they have paid too much for the war. Darren accepted the father's value. Because the more I say it, the more confused I become, and I simply don't say it. Finally, he closed his eyes. Snape looked at his sleeping face, with pride in his eyes. However, he still said sarcastically, having said so much, I have not found the life and death water inside. Oh, Severus, don't ask Darren so much, what we need to do is find the snake as soon as possible. By the way, Minerva informed Harry that Quidditch had cancelled, and, to stop all activities, had them all stay in the lounge. Maybe we really have to close the school until we find the snake and start school. Dumbledore stood up. He wanted to leave the school doctor's office. But an L interrupted his movements. It threw a letter at Dumbledore. Dumbledore picked up the envelope. Looking at the words above, his body suddenly stood upright. I need to go to the Ministry of Magic and hopefully. Minerva also has Severus guarding the school. I think we may be in some trouble, but don't worry too much, the most important thing is the snake at school. He pulled out his wand and waved it in front of him. A black hole-like vortex appeared in front of him. Do your own thing and wait for me to come back. He stepped inside, then disappeared into place. I also need to get those students to stay in the lounge as soon as possible. Severus, you go and inform Professor Flitwick and Professor Sprout that we must keep the rest of the students safe, she said solemnly. Then he also turned and left the school infirmary. Snape snorted. He glanced at Madame Pomfrey as if to say something, but Madame Pomfrey smiled and said, rest assured, he will wake up, it should be fine, and I will urge him to hurry back to Slytherin. It's just how do you explain to others that no one else drank the antidote, only Darren did? Well, a potions master, whether his potion passes the marketing criteria or not, he can give it to himself. Therefore, he had a bottle of potions on him, which he himself forgot to drink on the spot and came to the school doctor's office to remember, can't he? Snape gave a reason. Then he glanced greedily at the child lying in bed. If it weren't for the fact that the child had offended Fudge, maybe even for this reason there wasn't a potions master who couldn't drink some of his own potions? Is it sinful to drink a potion that you have boiled? Laugh at. He also walked out of the school infirmary. Well, it seems I'm so old that I can't even think of such a reason. Madame Pomfrey said with some sighs. She checked Darren's condition with her wand again. Yes, it is indeed improving. After Harry separated from Darren, he quickly went to the dressing room and changed into Quidditch's uniform. This time it's a race against Slytherin. The two sides shook hands. Mrs. Hodge also announced the rules of the game. When she blew a whistle, Harry's leapt into the air. Stop, the Quidditch game is cancelled. Just then, Professor McGonagall's voice spread throughout the Quidditch arena. Then came Mrs. Hodge's whistle. They could only fall to the ground. Professor, what's going on? It's a Quidditch game, and this time we can definitely beat Slytherin, Wood said in disbelief. It was the least suspenseful time they could win a Slytherin Quidditch. The other side was already full of sweat. It's a mess. Gryffindor will definitely win. Quidditch trophy, extra points. Yeah, Professor, think about it again. The Weasley twins also gathered around Professor McGonagall. There was another attack, and everyone went back to their own college lounges. Don't let me say it a second time. Professor McGonagall said sternly. Then she set her sights on Harry's body. Harry. You come with me. Her voice had never been softer than ever. But Harry didn't feel any honor, he just felt frightened. Even some students at other colleges are aware of something. Professor McGonagall, yes, is there something wrong with Darren? A Slytherin girl asked. Professor McGonagall did not answer. She pursed her lips and said sternly, except for Harry. Ron, you come too, except for the two of them, the rest of the people go back, and there will be a person in charge to tell you. Come on, Harry, and Ron. Good value for money, Professor McGonagall said pityingly and sadly. Episode 272, Darren cheated on you. Harry and Ron were already shaking nervously. They didn't know what was going on and could only follow Professor McGonagall's footsteps in a panic. As they walked through several corridors and the crowd grew thinner, Professor McGonagall said with red eyes, there was a double attack, one was Hermione, the other was Darren. She was a little choked. But Harry and Ron were already in a state of flux. Hermione. Darren went to find Hermione. And can't he block those eyes? How come? How come? Harry said in a trembling voice. Darren, you don't have to worry too much, he did petrify his leg. But he was taking the antidote Hermione, which might require an antidote at the end of the semester, but Darren says he can face. Isn't he very strong? How could he? Harry was still hard to imagine. In his mind, Darren was strong. Even if Darren is captured, he is convinced that Darren can come back. As long as he wants to come back, he has enough strength to come back. How can this be? Harry, Darren lied to you. He was not invincible, he could no longer face the snake. It is very likely that the next time he stands in the way of others, he will die completely, and his strength will no longer be able to resist. Professor McGonagall said sadly. That child always kept her in pain. He knew that he was becoming more and more unable to face the snake, but he still tried hard to help others. I just knew. I knew it. He's always like this, is he crazy? Harry gritted his teeth and said angrily. But when he looked through the curtain of the school doctor's office and saw Darren's figure lying quietly on the hospital bed, he still couldn't help but blush. This child may not wake up until tomorrow. You don't have to worry about it, as for Hermione. Alas, Madame Pomfrey sighed softly. Let's go back. Professor McGonagall made them look at Darren and Hermione and urged them to leave. When they returned to the common room, everyone gathered around. All right, sit down, I'll talk. Professor McGonagall said coldly. Then she took out a piece of parchment and pasted it on the Gryffindor bulletin board. It says that from now on, all students must stay in the lounge. Food will be delivered to the lounge. Even if you have something important to go out, you have to come back by 6 p.m. The principal is already planning to close the school, and this may be the first time. Professor McGonagall said something bitter. Then she went out of the Gryffindor lounge with red eyes and clumsiness. As soon as she went out, the Gryffindor lounge was immediately more anxious than ever. Everyone gathered around Harry. What's going on? Who is it? Is it Darren? Why didn't Hermione come back? they asked in tongues. When it was learned that both Darren and Hermione had been petrified, the lounge was quiet. Only Ginny's low sobs. Ginny is so sad, you know, she's been especially fond of you since she met you and Darren. Whoever of you had an accident with, she was upset, Fred whispered in Harry's ear. Obviously, it should be a joke, but he just didn't squeeze out a smile. Harry forced himself to nod his head. He and Ron went back to the dormitory. Lying in bed, he thought of Darren's legs. When he passed, Darren's leg was still not fully recovered. And Hermione. Hermione was petrified, but her face was still full of worry. What did she see before she was petrified? Harry felt that his mind was messed up. He even wanted to rush out alone. He wanted to find the snake, he wanted to kill the snake. It almost killed Darren. I'm a brother, and I can't always let Darren protect me. He suddenly sat up from the bed. Ron sat up too. Harry glanced at Ron, and they nodded in agreement. Prepare to leave. Harry, can you take me with you when you go out looking for clues? As he thought this, Harry heard Neville's forehead towering. He looked at Neville in amazement. He didn't understand why Neville thought that. Obviously this matter has no impact on Neville, why should Neville act with them? And he was still so afraid, why should he force himself? Harry, have you been through a particularly poor time? I have. That day, I heard them say that if they didn't pay enough for their medical bills, they would kick them out. I saw Grandma's desperate eyes, and I didn't dare to speak or do anything, because I knew I couldn't do anything. I even heard my uncle and grandmother say, if it doesn't work, let Mom and Dad come back, because they still have me to raise. They can't give all their money to St. Mungo. I didn't dare to say anything, I could only cry secretly, they may have heard me cry, but none of us debunked it. But the next day, I heard them say that someone had paid all of Mom and Dad's medical bills. Also said it was a boy. She described the boy's appearance, which I had never known or known specifically. It wasn't until the last time Darren was sent to St. Mungo, when she finally knew Darren's name, that Grandma and I knew that it was Darren who did it, and that he didn't even mean to let us know. I've always wanted to thank him, but I don't know what to do, so can you take me with you? I'll find a way to help you, Harry smiled bitterly. That's the way it is. Darren had also helped Neville. This is not surprising. He always did. He always did good things quietly, for fear of causing a little trouble to others. Merely. He still turned down Neville. You're too weak to help us. Harry didn't bother to worry about Neville anymore. He took out his cloak of invisibility from inside the cupboard, and he wanted to leave. Don't be in such a hurry, I'll be fine right away. Ron put on his shoes. The two of them quickly drilled out of the dormitory. Only Neville sat alone in the dormitory. The expression on his face was a little bitter and a little relieved. Also, isn't there only one kind person like Darren? Episode 273, Dumbledore is driven out. Harry, where are you going? Ron walked out of the lounge and asked in a low voice. Because there was a ghost floating by their side. I'm going to find Hagrid. Hagrid? Didn't Darren say that there was nothing wrong with him? Harry nodded, then shook his head again. Darren is talking about the results of the analysis. Riddle must have been wrong, he wronged Hagrid. But have you ever wondered if it is possible that Hagrid's pet has ever seen that snake? You mean? We went to Hagrid and asked him to ask his pet if he had seen the snake somewhere? Ron agreed. Then they walked through the eerie corridors and prepared to leave the castle. But they didn't have a good ride along the way. Because there are serious professors along the way, there are many ghosts, and even Peeves has joined the patrol, although it is still constantly making trouble, but it does not object. You see, even they were so excited, because they knew that Hogwarts would probably be closed because of this incident. Even Darren couldn't stop the Basilisk's eyes, and the others couldn't do it. I didn't want Hogwarts to close, which meant I had to go back to our aunt's house with Darren. Although my aunt is getting better now, I still don't like them very much. Hogwarts is my home, Harry said seriously. Then they went out from inside the castle. When they appeared in front of Hagrid's hut, all they saw was Hagrid's frightened gaze. How do you? Hagrid really wanted to ask how they had come. Yet he suddenly pushed them into the corner and covered them with their cloaks of invisibility. Oh, Hagrid, I have to inform you of a sad news. A short fat man appeared outside Hagrid's door. It was Minister Fudge. He was still dressed like a kaleidoscope this time. Every piece of clothing on the body has a different color. Of course, his wizarding hat was still green. He was followed by Lucius. Harry and Ron also knew him, and he was Malfoy's father. The expression on Lucius's face at this time was full of irritation. He looked at Hagrid angrily, and then he showed a mocking expression and said, "You didn't think of that, did you? What you did 50 years ago can still be dug up." Harry felt that if he looked at Lucius like this, he would think that he was righteous. He seemed to think that Hagrid had done it. And spoke in the tone of a Hagrid petrified his son. More righteous than Harry, they all looked real. No, it's not me, I didn't do. Hagrid said in a panic. You don't? If you hadn't done that, who would have done it? You think you can escape? Don't you hurry to explain. How did you open the Chamber of Secrets? Lucius said angrily. Harry felt that Malfoy's anger was also very real. He couldn't pretend. Enough, Lucius, I think this must have been a misunderstanding. Fortunately, Dumbledore appeared. He stood by Hagrid's side, looking at Lucius solemnly. Harry noticed that Lucius Malfoy wanted to pull out his wand for an instant. But in the end, he resisted the urge. But he said angrily, Dumbledore, you really should give an explanation. There have been so many attacks in this school, if I were you, I would resign. What, how did that happen? Fudge watched Lucius and Dumbledore's for-tat confrontation. He said in a hesitant voice. But Harry noticed that he seemed to be about to laugh. You can't drive Dumbledore away, and without Dumbledore, who else can resist those people? Hagrid roared angrily. But Lucius was not afraid. He pulled a piece of parchment out of his pocket. Above is a proposal to expel Dumbledore from the post of headmaster. It was signed with names. See? Dumbledore, all the directors have signed now. Is it time for you to leave? Lucius showed a mocking expression. He placed the parchment on Dumbledore's hand and looked at Dumbledore coldly. How many times has this been? Dumbledore was of no use here. Harry frowned, a little unconvinced that Dumbledore could be chased away by such a piece of parchment. It was really Dumbledore who was really too powerful in his eyes. However, Dumbledore did not refute it. He said coldly, of course I can go, but I believe that in this school, as long as anyone wants to find me, he will definitely get help. Harry felt that Dumbledore was speaking to him. But he doesn't doubt that. Because his cloak of invisibility was given to him by Dumbledore. He was able to feel that they were here, and it was perfectly normal. Is it just that Dumbledore was really driven away by such a piece of paper? He was still very surprised. But Dumbledore really left. With Dumbledore's departure, Hagrid no longer argues with Fudge. He sorted out his clothes and said, if anyone wants to know something, maybe they can follow the spider. Follow the spiders, and they can find the right path, and by the way, I need someone to feed me teeth. Hagrid followed Fudge. Lucius was alone in the room. He looked at the room with some hesitation, as if thinking of something but finally said nothing, and chased Fudge away. It's over, Dumbledore is fired, Hagrid is taken away, and we're definitely going to close the door. The tense atmosphere of the next day was even stronger. But the good news is that Darren has been discharged from the hospital. When he saw Harry and Ron, the look on his face was so guilty that he didn't even dare to look them in the eye. Harry and Ron thought he had finally realized that his kind act of saving was wrong. As a result, I heard him say sadly, I'm sorry, I didn't save Hermione, I was almost about to save her, and as a result. In short, it's all my fault, I always let everyone down, and I still hurt Hermione. Harry and Ron were helpless. It's my fault, I thought I could get to know Darren better, alas. Darren, you should think more about yourself, you've been petrified yourself. If you hadn't carried the antidote with you, you would probably be lying there like Hermione, right now. And the petrified Hermione's is the snake, not you. Episode 274, Snape's Taunt. Harry looked at Darren helplessly. But Darren still didn't have a smile on his face. Next, he looked much more melancholy. Even if Harry had let him eat in Gryffindor, he had only eaten part of it absent-mindedly. It's almost half the usual amount of food. What if you don't eat like this? When Hermione woke up, she would be sad. Harry coaxed Darren to eat a beef patty. Darren's disgusted skimmer. Not to hate this pie. Rather, he had been forced to eat a meal in Slytherin. Then in Gryffindor, and then forced to eat. It's hard to get people around. And he said he had eaten at Slytherin, and no one believed him. Everyone thought he would not be able to eat. But he ate it. He ate in his dorm room, then waited out of the dorm room, and in the Slytherin lounge, he was forced to eat another meal. When Gryffindor arrived, he didn't let him go. No matter how delicious things are, now placed in front of him, he can't eat them. Fortunately, he remembered that the system also gave him a skill that did not eat fat. Otherwise, he felt that he might have to be fed a visible rounded up for a few days. Thanks for the help of the system. Darren expressed great satisfaction with the reward. But with a satisfied look, he still showed a melancholy expression when he saw the food Harry had given him in front of him. No, I don't eat, I'm going back. Yes, I want to see Hermione, and Justin them. All blame me. His eyes were a little red again. But afraid of affecting Harry's mood, he quickly hid his sadness. How could Harry and Ron have ignored his sadness? They were always watching him. After seeing his uncomfortable appearance again, they couldn't eat anymore. Yeah, Hermione is in the school doctor's office right now, how can they eat it? Harry felt his stomach hurt. But seeing that Darren was leaving, he and Ron quickly followed. They also wanted to see Hermione. When they arrived at the school doctor's office, they found that Mrs. Pomfrey had locked up the school doctor's office. Finding out that Darren had come over, she opened a crack and said, "You guys hurry back, now Dumbledore is not here, who knows what happens back to this school, be sure to be safe." They had to walk back in ashes. "Oh, why are there so many spiders?" As they walked through a window, Ron suddenly said in disgust. Harry and Darren looked over. They noticed a whole bunch of little spiders running out of the window. Spiders. "Brother, did you listen to Hagrid and follow the spider to find the answer?" Darren approached the spiders. Harry and Ron nodded hesitantly. They felt it would be better if Darren hadn't been involved. But Darren shook his head. Of course he wants to go, not how to brush the task. How not to brush the father's value. So he said in a low voice, "Brother, let me go? Every day I close my eyes, I think of my uselessness. I even kind of wanted to give myself something to lie there like Hermione." Harry and Ron would have been unwilling. But when I heard him say this, I instantly agreed to his request. But they were still worried. "Darren, do you need to go to the school infirmary to show Mrs. Pomfrey? You are more worried than Hermione." "Yeah, look at your face, it's uglier than Hermione these 2 days, you don't put so much pressure on yourself," they said worriedly. Darren smiled as hard as he could. He said gently, "I'm sorry to worry you and Ron, brother, but I'm fine. What is pale is a normal thing, and I was lying to you just now. I know the weight, how could I blame myself on Hermione, and Justin, and Nick? I forgot." His last sentence was inaudible, as if he hadn't said it, but obviously his voice was very heavy. Harry wanted to point out the problem, only to find that Darren's eyes were redder. It's all right, brother asked you to follow, don't worry, they'll all be fine," Harry said worriedly. Then I felt that my comfort was useless. Because Darren's smile was hard to squeeze out. He tried his best to make them think he was much better. He did grow up a little. In the 1st grade, I couldn't lie at all, but now I can lie smoothly. Obviously, he was already sad, and he still made a happy appearance. Such a Darren, he didn't even want to look at his disguise. If he could be like the 1st grade, obediently let them see how good it would be. Even if he sat here now and shed tears, it was better than this. "Look, Scarhead is bullying his brother here." Malfoy's voice interrupted Harry. Darren frowned, he stood up, and then said angrily, "Malfoy, my brother didn't bully me." There is no bullying without bullying, I don't care at all. Then again, you know, Dumbledore was driven away. My dad said that Dumbledore was the worst headmaster of the school's history, and he was finally gone. Darren was trying to say something to show his father's light. I saw Snape coming from a distance. He took a serious look at Darren, and then he glanced casually over Harry's face. Then, as if remembering something, he said sarcastically, "The famous Harry Potter has not yet found the murderer of the attack. It seems that being famous does not mean useful." "Professor." Darren interrupted Snape. He pursed his lips, obviously feeling bad about talking back to the professor, but he still said seriously, "Brother is not obligated to find out the snake, he has been a savior, but we all know that he is only a 2nd-year student." Episode 275. He also wants to be the headmaster? Darren's words made Harry raise the corners of his mouth triumphantly. Although what Snape had said before, it did make him angry. But he was overjoyed to hear that Darren, his brother, was defending him. But Snape was clearly upset. He seemed to remember something, and said with some disgust, "Someone still remembers that he is a 2nd-year student, and I thought he was a student who was about to graduate, or a professor at this school. Otherwise, how could he blame all the attacks on himself?" Harry wanted for a moment to echo what Snape had said. However, Snape added, "Do you think you are also worthy of the responsibility for those attacks?" His tone was sarcastic. Harry was furious. He knew that this Snape didn't have a good word to say to the 2 brothers. How is Darren not worthy? He was the best student in the school. Snape seemed to notice Harry just then. He squinted his eyes, his lips moved, as if cursing something. Then he said in a mocking tone, the famous Harry Potter can't catch the attacker, but here he talks back to his poor potions professor. Gryffindor buckle 20 points, because of your arrogance." Darren looked at Snape's triumphant expression and was about to laugh. Sure enough, Snape's happiness was to embarrass Harry. "Professor, I heard that Professor McGonagall's headmaster was only temporary, so why didn't you call the headmaster for the position? If you apply, I will vote for you." Draco Malfoy was not willing to be left out in the cold, he said excitedly. Snape's face instantly turned happy. Not to mention, he even had a day comparable to Dumbledore. Thinking that if Dumbledore had really been driven away by him, he would have been so comfortable. He might be able to take good care of Darren in school, and by the way, teach Harry Potter a lesson that made him desperate. It's just a thought. Dumbledore's presence, in this era, did stabilize the entire school. Now that Dumbledore was gone, the whole school was in a panic. He could only follow Darren almost all day. Whether it's direct or invisible. He was always worried that something would happen to him suddenly. But he could only do what Darren did when he was outside. If Darren had returned to his dorm room, or to the Gryffindor lounge, he would have left. Since the last time Darren's dorm room was exposed, anyone who let him approve of it could enter. Another student was cast a Soul Reaper spell just after placing the door key on him. Snape had already set up Darren's door from scratch. Except for Darren himself, no one could open it again. He thinks that if there is anything to do, stay outside the door and wait. Knock on the door, the Potter in the door should open the door. As for if he wants to enter, just slam the door and go in. So, as long as Darren enters the Slytherin lounge, Snape is still at ease. As for the Gryffindor lounge, he really didn't want to go in. He felt obscure. This was the consequence of Dumbledore's absence from this school. Snape also missed the old man a little at this time. At least when the old man was there, he could at least relax a little. Just looking at Harry Potter's cool face like James Potter's face showing anger, he still showed a proud smile and said, "Thank you for your good word. If I become the principal one day, I will make you the prefect." When Snape disappeared into the corner, Harry finally couldn't help but take a bite. What the heck? Even if he still wants to take Dumbledore's place? He looked in disbelief at the place where Snape had disappeared. Apparently, he really wanted to give Snape a mirror and let Snape take a good look at himself. Well, Professor Snape is joking, he's just trying to make you angry. Darren pointed this out funny, but Harry thought it was Darren's filter on Snape. Snape still kidding? He's a sinister, evil bastard. But he eventually put up with these words. Because he rarely saw Darren show a sincere smile. Because there were so many people during the day, they finally decided to come out at night. They were ready to follow those spiders at night to see where they were going. Darren had been in the Gryffindor lounge until late at night, when he left the castle with Harry and Ron. Together, they came to the front of Hagrid's hut. Yaya heard their voices and quickly grabbed the door happily. They opened the door. Teeth pounced on them. Bring your teeth and teeth with you, it should be safer, right? Harry looked at Darren's expression and said with some hesitation. Darren really wanted to say that it was better to go with teeth than on his own. He remembered that in the original book, when facing those spiders, the teeth did not have any power. It was trapped as well. But as a little Holy Father, of course, he can't say that his teeth are useless. He showed a worried look. Tooth and Tooth don't have much fighting power, it will be very unsafe to carry it, it is just a poor puppy. Why don't we go on our own? Forehead. I don't know how many people are crowded in this small room. Obviously it seemed that only Harry and Ron were the two people who provided the Holy Father value. Who knew that there were 4 or 5 fatherly reminders? It's outrageous. There were so many people standing in such a hut, and it was not too crowded. Darren complained silently. But still pretend not to know anything. He looked into the distance worriedly and said, I hope we can quickly find out the reason, so that no one in the castle will be injured again. I thought the same thing, I didn't want Hogwarts to close, and now Dumbledore is gone. The Ministry of Magic is crazy, and who but Dumbledore can take care of such a big school? Harry also had Ron angrily complaining. Darren felt that the others were not taking good care of the school, it was that Dumbledore was a little too strong. With him there, others hardly have to think about any danger, just teach well. However, Dumbledore's departure was presumably also to train Harry. By virtue of the value of the Holy Father he had heard, he knew that there was definitely a Dumbledore among the invisible people in it.